You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge for life.
And thank you all for tuning in to this live forum where we're dealing with the topic of the school to prison pipeline. We're here at the Coffee Lounge on Philadelphia, a black-owned establishment that is, the owner is Brother Darren Boykin. And today, to talk about this subject, we have the founders of Racial Justice Now. We have Professor Fidelia Randall. Hello. And Sister Zakia. Thank you. And we want to, we want to get right on into it. If we can you tell us a little bit about Racial Justice Now? Why we started?
Sure. My name is Zakia St. formerly known as Maria Holt. Professor Randall and I decided to start Racial Justice Now, basically as a result of being frustrated with the lack of organizations and people organizing around issues of racial injustice. And we won't name anybody specifically, so we just got together and talked about it. For me, myself at the time, I was going through my son, who was 3 years old at the time, being put up for expulsion from preschool. And so I started to advocate for him. I became a default activist and advocating for him, and started talking to Professor Randall about how we could start helping other parents, who are facing the same issue. Because as a result of my research, when I filed a civil rights complaint, I found out it was a national issue. It wasn't just unique to me or parents in this area. It's a nationwide issue, and so that was. She has anything else to add?
No, that's exactly right. And my frustration came from watching. I actually felt very sad, and I had been feeling very sad for a very long time, because I feel like my generation, and I'm of the Jim Crow generation, I reaped the benefits of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I was 18 at that time. And everything in my life came about because of that. But we allowed for Jim Crow to be reestablished.
Yeah.
And that, and I felt like each of us could only do what we can do where we are, but first we got to acknowledge that we live in a system of oppression that is every bit as onerous as Jim Crow was. And secondly, we have to deal with what we think we can make a change in terms of undermining that system. And for us, that was the school to prison pipeline. Stopping what's happening with our children in the educational system, putting them into. So as a racial justice issue, we wanted to be clear about it, because we wanted to make sure that people understood we're not talking about all kinds of injustice, we're talking about racial justice.
That's right.
And first, I neglected to introduce myself. My name is Steve Muhammad, and the organization is Knowledge for Life. We're a non-profit 501c3, and our mission is to bring relevant news and information, and to begin to spark some type of activism once again, because as you were saying, our community, when we're looking at all of the different things that's impacting our community, as a community, we're very complacent. We're in some instances, we're apathetic, and in some situations, we're even fearful, even though we see the crisis that we are in as a people. So Knowledge for Life brings these issues to the front, and we use multimedia as we are broadcasting live now. You can go to www.knowforlife.org or www.knowforlife.info and learn more about Knowledge for Life. We have this here. I just got this. I don't know if you all saw this.
Report card.
A report card, and this is not that we're endorsing. I'm just bringing this out. It's from State Senator Bill Beagle, and I just want to read this and get you all's comment on it. It says parents receive regular report cards so they know exactly how their children are performing in school. But Ohio parents were kept in dark on how well their children's schools were performing. Not anymore, thanks to State Senator Bill Beagle. Every Ohio school now receives report cards that are graded from A to F that every parent can see. School report cards empower parents with greater information and help ensure Ohio children are receiving the best education possible. And what are you all's comments on that as far as the schools receiving a report card?
Well, the schools have been receiving a report card for as long as I can remember. I went my last 2 years of high school here. I think the significant change with the report card is the only thing that they changed it from was the letter grade, is I believe what this state senator is talking about. For me, I have maybe mixed emotions about that because I think that for the urban school district, the way that the academic report card is set up doesn't take into account a lot of the issues that the urban schools face. So the urban schools, I think, for parents who live in an urban school district, they may, see that their schools are not performing well ever or at all. And especially when you put that letter grade on there, it receives a D or an F. And I think that at the same time, while this state senator is touting the fact that he passed this reform with this letter grade, I would want to know what he has done to make sure that the schools have received adequate resources to live up to the grade. And I think that's an issue, especially again for urban schools, is making sure they receive the adequate resources for the type of student population they have to make sure that they have everything that they need and deserve to make the letter grade that we would all want for the schools.
One of the huge frustrations I have is that, especially around election time, people will tout out these things that they say they have done. Generally, they're insignificant in terms of making any long-term systemic changes. A significant step would have been to actually do something about, as Zakia says, actually do something about funding, especially since the Supreme Court of Ohio has held twice that funding the way the state of Ohio funds schools is illegal. And the legislature has not found a way to make it legal. And they're not trying to find. I mean, it's been years. This is not a recent occurrence. I don't know, I can't tell you the exact date, but I know it's been over 20 years.
Now when you say illegal, what are you?
That the way they fund, the way the state of Ohio funds schools, and I can't get into big detail because this is not an area of study of mine, but I just watched it. The way they fund schools perpetuates illegal sort of discrimination. Inequality, exactly. And that, and so poor schools stay poor, rich schools get richer, and the state of the Ohio Supreme Court says you gotta find another way of funding schools because you are perpetuating inequality. That's happened twice. They happened the first time. It took years and years and years for them for the legislature to do something, and when they finally did something, the people who sued went back to court saying this really doesn't make a significant change, and the court said right. But interesting enough is the legislature, what have they done in the last 6-8 years on school funding? So he's putting out a thing about a report card. Is that the most important issue? What about the school funding issue. And so I think that's an issue. The other issue for me, and I think for both of us, is that the report card only reports academic. It doesn't report how schools do in the area of discipline. And so in other kinds of areas, like how are schools doing on cultural competency education? How are schools doing on implicit bias education? How are schools doing on diversity of their staff? That's something I, as a parent, would want to know and would like to see. I think grades are good. I'm a teacher. Who wouldn't? I grade, that's what I do. And so I think grading is a good thing. I think grading makes people stand up, listen, pay attention. If you do it right, set the right criteria, people can judge themselves and say, I need to do more of this in order to get a better grade. So I think with appropriate criteria, grades are a good thing. I'm not a pass-fail kind of person. I think you should have A to F. But I don't think the criteria is criteria that represents everything that an urban parent would want to know. Some urban parents, black parents, to be specific. And I know it all. It doesn't deal anything with school discipline.
And since this is Knowledge Cipher, we want you who are in the listening audience to also participate and ask questions. And as we develop, we'll also be able to take questions right over the internet to those who are viewing this.
I just thought that was a great segue into Racial Justice Now releasing the first ever school discipline report card for the entire state of Ohio. We did that October 6th. So it's almost been a month ago now. And you can go to our website at www.racialjusticenow.org, and all 1,067 school districts are up on our website, and they all receive a letter grade as well, the A through F letter grade. And we basically, like Professor Randall stated, we think that that's an important measurement for parents, especially black parents, to have when it's time for them to look for a school or a specific school district that they feel that they can put their children in. I know as a parent of a young, energetic black male son who's in the second grade, school discipline is very important for me because he doesn't fit the typical mold of what America wants as a student, to just be able to come and sit for 8 hours and have messages and information just fed into them. He likes to move. He's a kinesthetic learner, and many of the American classrooms are just not set up that way. So he gets himself into a lot of trouble for being disruptive, and that's what we see when we start talking about the school to prison pipeline. Students are being suspended, even expelled for disruptive and disobedient or defiant behavior. All of those things are very, very subjective, and you also get into a huge racial disparity when you look at which students who are being suspended and expelled
For the same behavior.
For the same behavior.
I think that's an important point.
It's a very important point, and so that's why, again, this is a nationwide issue. We're a part of the Dignity in Schools campaign, which is in over 23 states in over 90 different cities, and we see this as a pattern, literally in the Midwest, the Northwest, Northeast, South, Southeast, the West, everywhere. So that's why we think that releasing the school discipline report card, we're the first in the nation to do that, is a very, very important thing for Ohio parents to know about and for the nation to know about.
Anyone have? Yes, sir.
I also believe that this report card, it needs to be defined as to what this letter grade is reporting on.
Yes.
Because it hasn't been communicated in a simplified way as to what the letter grade is being applied to. You know,
The academic report card?
Say again, please.
The Ohio academic report card?
Yes.
Our report card.
As well as your report.
Oh, okay.
Because the data that goes into it is data driven from another source. Those other sources are the same individuals who were part of what brought us to this position to begin with. So it has to be defined and simplified for those parents to understand it.
I think we absolutely agree with that, and we're looking for a way to do that. Our report card has 3 factors, and whenever we talk about the report card, because we believe that a grade by itself is not enough. You can never make a change with just a grade. What does an A mean? What does an F mean? What does a D mean? So you got to know, as you said, what factors went into it, and we always communicate that, and it's up on our website. And in fact, there's over 600 pages. We've got to simplify it and find a way. But basically, the factors we looked at was, factor 1 was exclusion. What is the rate of exclusion? We also looked at whether they excluded preschool to 3rd grade, and also looked at 7th to 9th grade.
There was a special thing they got for that.
A penalty.
Penalty.
Yeah, so everybody starts off with 100, and then based on your rate of exclusion, for exclusion being out-of-school suspension and expulsions, you got a grade. Then if you also had expulsions for preschool to 3rd grade, you got a penalty, like for being late. The analogy is, yes, I grade 0 to 100, but if you turn your paper in 2 days late, you get deducted 20 points. You might have had an A paper to start off with, but you don't have an A paper anymore because you turned it in late. We had penalty points for preschool to 3rd grade. We also had, and we can talk more about why we did that. I just want to run through the factors real quick. We also had penalty points for 7th to 9th grade, okay? So that was the first factor, and everybody got a grade on that factor, and then on the website you can go and you can see just that. What was the grade my school district got for that factor, okay? The second factor was subjective discipline. So the question becomes, how much of the discipline, out of school suspension, we're not talking about discipline together. We're not disagreeing with disciplines in school. I think that's a real important thing. We think there has to be discipline in school. Just like you can't have a family in which you have no discipline, you can't have a school in which you have no discipline. The question is, what is the form the discipline takes? And we think that just like in families, beating kids is no longer acceptable. In schools, suspending them is no longer acceptable. And so if you're suspending a lot of kids for subjective things, they were disruptive, they were disobedient, they were, what's the other term I use a lot? Defiant. So they didn't move. You said something to them and they didn't move quick enough, or they gave you attitude. We don't think suspension is an appropriate tool for that. And so we again had a grade of 100, and our criteria was, is more than 50% of your discipline for that kind of subjective discipline. So we're not saying you have 0 in the criteria we use. We're not saying that you should have 0 discipline for subjective discipline. We're saying that it shouldn't be more than 50% of whatever discipline you're doing. And people are doing 69, 79. Some jurisdiction, all they're suspending for is subjective discipline. There's no discipline for fights, there's no discipline for anything else, just subjective discipline.
And sister, did you want
I'm sorry?
I thought you had.
No, I was listening at this.
Okay.
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 And so the subjective discipline, you're just saying that is just like you're saying, just being, I don't know, not sitting in your seat? Is that-
Well, I mean, it rises to a level. I'm sure teachers will say that it rises to a level in one
Talking back,
occurrence,
students
stuff like
talking
that.
back, yeah.
But the question becomes, should the kids be removed from an educational environment because they are defiant? Shouldn't an educational environment have a way of addressing those kinds of problems? And there are ways. We can talk about them. Restorative justice. There's all kinds of methods that are being used successfully other than suspension. So we're just saying that that subject is discipline. And then we did a penalty, another penalty thing. We did a penalty for schools that, no, this is subject to discipline category.
Okay.
Suspension for use of tobacco
Truancy,
and suspension for truancy.
which makes no sense.
The suspension for truancy makes no sense. And we did the use of tobacco one because it gets disproportionately used against black students, even though all the health statistics indicate that black students smoke less than any other group. And so it's kind of like, are you using this use of tobacco? It's kind of like, and furthermore, isn't that something you can't, I mean, if a kid is smoking in school, isn't that something you ought to be able to handle? They're not fighting, they're not cursing, they're not being defiant, they're smoking, you know, so we gave a penalty point for that. That was the second thing.
Because basically that warrants suspension.
Oh, yeah.
Some people, lots of people suspended the use of tobacco.
And so what they're in essence doing is they're saying, don't smoke here, go home and smoke.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, go anywhere you want, just, you're not gonna be in school. And now, you know, it may be that the kid who is use of tobacco has been defiant in their use. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that there are other discipline methods that could be used besides suspension for those for subjective discipline. So the third criteria,
Racial disparity. That was over 50% of the grade. And let me back up just a little bit, because I really want the viewing audience to sort of get this picture in their mind. So this over-reliance on out-of-school suspensions is a more recent phenomenon. I can remember, and I can tell you my age, I'm only 33 years old, but I can remember growing up in school, and all of these same behaviors were occurring when I was a kid. But out-of-school suspension was never an option. I grew up in the South, okay, and the teachers and the principals dealt with us. I mean, you know, we went to the office, you know, we got reprimanded. Out-of-school suspensions just was not the norm. I mean, it wasn't even thought of. I don't know that it was even in our student code of conduct. So, I mean, there's been a shift to kicking kids out of school, and I'm not sure exactly when that happened, but there's an over-reliance of it, and that's how you get into this whole terminology of the cradle or school to prison pipeline, because when you're kicking kids out of school, okay, they're getting in trouble because they're not in school. And so they're ended up in the juvenile justice system, and they're not learning when you kick the kids out of school. So I just wanted to back up and really make sure I paint that picture for people, because I don't want people to get in this idea that, well, haven't we always done that? No, this is new, and kids haven't changed. Okay, kids are gonna always be kids. They're gonna do stuff that's gonna, I mean, get under your skin. As parents, we can't say, okay, you're gonna get out of my house for 3 days. I mean, you know, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Did you find when you were doing your research that there was a disparity between not only the races, but black children, males versus females? Were there more men or male children that were suspended than the females?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
excellent, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But there's an interesting thing that has to be noted. Males are suspended way more than females, okay? But black females have a greater disparity
Between white, Asian people.
between white and Asian females than black males have to white boys. Is that making sense?
Yes, I understand that.
So our girls are being penalized too, and so we're not here to make a big okay. Black males are catching hell, okay. Black girls are catching hell too. We both are, but black males are by and large as a whole being suspended more, expelled more. I mean, we see in the news they're being killed and everything by trigger happy police, everything. This is, but with our girls, like she said, and it was amazing because when we actually started looking at it by gender, it's like, wow, you know, the difference between black girls and the rest of the girls, Asian, Hispanic, and white girls, was huge. I mean, so this is a war on black children. That's what we need people to understand.
We also looked at economics.
Yes, and disadvantaged children and children with disabilities. I mean, it's horrible.
And what we found was because people will say, oh, isn't this a case of poor? That there are more poor kids, and so that is the reason. A greater percentage of black people are poor. Poor people are having greater problems. And so consequently the discipline problem, the reason we have the racial disparity is because of that. But when we looked at the data, what we found was, yeah, poor black kids, poor is defined by the city, okay? And Elder Greer's point is really good. The data we use is the data that they gave us, which means that it's underreported, in our opinion. So that the situation is probably worse than what we're painting it, because but we are limited in that we are using the data that they gave to the state. But when we looked at, they have a category called economically disadvantaged, and I give the state of Ohio this because in your work, not many states release this much information.
No, especially the states in the South, they don't even collect the information. So we have organizations that are in Mississippi, Georgia. I'm not sure about Florida, but I know that Mississippi and Georgia, they do not collect the state data. So those organizations that are part of the Dignity in Schools campaign have to rely strictly on federal government data.
Now, when you're talking about the data, are you
Can I
talking
get
about?
back to the data?
Yeah, but that data, are you talking about poverty, or are you talking about what?
Well, that's what, okay. The state of Ohio, and you can go, it's called Advanced Reports, Ohio Department of Education Advanced Report. Any citizen can go there and look up anything they want because they put all their data, they put most of their data on the internet. And so you can go and you can run searches. And one of the categories that they collect on is economically disadvantaged. And so you can run a correlation statistics between economic disadvantage and race. So you can say, and which we found out, what we found out was black children from poor homes are suspended more, and we're talking about Dayton now, more than any other group when you look at race and economics. But black children from non-economically disadvantaged are suspended more than white children who are poor. So being, you see what I'm saying? Say that.
Right, say that again.
That black children who are not from economically disadvantaged background,
So a middle class
background, our children
my son,
are being suspended more than white children from poor homes.
See. Wow.
What you gonna say?
That's, I can see that, yes. I definitely see
So that's where we don't apologize for making this a racial justice issue and people balk at that, but it just is what it is. The data is there. People's lived experiences, my lived experience is there. I had my son's principal tell me, you know, well, we just don't know why Amir is acting the way he is with parents like you know, because apparently, you know,
only the bad parents have kids who are disruptive. You know what I mean? So, and I'm just like, sometimes kids are kids. You know what I mean? And he learns differently. And it's time for the system to admit that it's not perfect in educating our children. In fact, it's my personal belief that the way the educational system in America is set up is not even set up for our children, period. And that's an entirely different issue. But your question?
Do you think the increase in suspension numbers of our children is because the teachers who don't live in our neighborhoods, who don't know our dynamics of the children that they're teaching, are scared of the children?
I think that's an issue.
I think that's an issue, but I think there's a bigger issue that we need to back off from, and really huge issue. I think, okay, schools. I went to a 2-room school whose purpose was to train farm kids who were going to go back to the farm. Educate them, not to train them to go to college, not to train them to go to career services, just to give them the basic reading, math skills and stuff necessary to make sure that give them a good basic education. But everybody knew that these kids were going back to the farm. Okay. So the educational system then adapted itself to the needs of that student, which included turning the complete school out when it was farming time. You know, it's sort of like, well, the kids need to be in the field, so they go to the field, and the school was out. And my dad used to take us all to the field at that time. So schools have always been about preparing. I mean, it's reading and writing and math and stuff, but it's always been about preparing students for a purpose in society, in my estimation. And I think what has happened is we now have a profit center in the United States called the prison industrial complex. And the product that is needed is prisoners. And you train and you set up a school system in which you ultimately push people towards that. You know, so that a more fundamental problem is the whole design of the school district, the mentality,
the structure of
the
the building.
structure of the building, the structure of the classroom, the patting people down, it's the uniforms, it's getting people to walk in line and be quiet. It's all conditioning behavior. And yes, some kids break, you know, not every kid is going, it's only a certain percentage. But the two things I'm going to say, and then I'll go to Elder Greer. The United States has spent more on prisons than it's spent on education in the last 20 years. And prisons, predictions of when to do prison is based on 4th grade. So that means school, everybody knows that we're training people, some segment of that population, to be prisoners.
Can I say
Yes,
this?
you had a...
And to add to that, and I don't know, some people may have a different opinion. The fact that you put our children that live in a public education in school uniforms. If you see all the other school systems with children coming up, they get to wear the regular clothes. Our children wear school uniforms. To me, and I've always said that, and I've always been probably one of the lone parents against wearing school uniforms. I was like, you're setting our children up to wear uniforms later on.
Yeah.
Pipeline to prison.
But you know, the thing is I think it's hard to, when you have systems, and this is what is so frustrating and depressing. People in the system never believe they're in there for goodwill. the teacher on the front line, the principal on the front line, they aren't thinking, let's train these kids for prison. But they don't have to if they support the system.
Right.
I mean, you don't have to think it.
Right.
You know, if the system, if people outside of you, legislators, other people, researchers, tell you this is what needs to be done, you know, you'll get better conduct if you get kids in uniforms, and you think, oh, okay, let me put them in uniforms, without thinking about what is the ramification on the child of having to do that. So, yes.
I was just going to share, since the Civil War, the mindsets of this country has been set against doing anything that will benefit African Americans. They have come around to where they are starting, because they have not succeeded because of our perseverance, they have by design created those factors to inundate their feelings and their thoughts of not doing anything for our people, to our children in academics. Remember, we used to would not be allowed to learn.
That's right.
You know, we were lynched for having a book in a home. Okay? So that mindset still exists even after the Civil War. So by design, every systemic institution was incorporated with a way to not allow African Americans to prosper in any way.
Oppressed, yes.
Same thing is going on with the school prison fight. Yeah, it is a design factor.
Let me,
It's
let
real.
me throw another element in here as well, as you're talking about the past and how we can look at the past and how it's impacting us. But let's now look at the future, and let us look at the robotics, and let's look at the how things are becoming more automated and mechanized. For instance, you know, we know that it's an outright flat lie to say that factories are coming back, because if the factories do come back, they're going to most likely be more automated, and they're not going to hire as many people because they don't need physical labor anymore. So now when you look at the more things are becoming automated and more things are becoming robotic, there is less need for that type of labor. So our children then need to be educated. Not only are they undereducated, but they're not even being prepared to go into a more computerized, I don't know, you know, more technical, more technical society. And one of the things that I want to throw also onto that is that now the schools they're reporting that the schools, not just being out walking around doing some type of criminal act, but the schools are the fastest way that black youth are entering into the criminal justice system. Through now less counselors and more officers. Can you all?
Well, you know, it goes back to the mindset of suspension and expulsion. It also goes back, zero tolerance. You want to explain that?
Yes, so I think that during the same time we started to see this evolution of out-of-school suspensions being a primary focus of school discipline was around the same time we started hearing language of zero tolerance. The same time they instituted zero tolerance for prisoners, third strike laws, is when they started instituting zero tolerance for certain behaviors in school. And so, again, all of this has been going on at least for the last 20 to 30 years, you know, in some places more than others. And we can see, I believe that if history serves me correctly, it started with the so-called Rockefeller laws in New York and expanded across the country. Zero tolerance is this idea that there is no chance for the student themselves to learn from the behavior or learn from what they did wrong, such as a restorative justice program or positive school climate. It's this over punitive approach, oh, well, you did that and this is just a result and we don't even want to hear why. That is the exact wrong thing to do, especially when you're dealing with children who come from high poverty backgrounds and children, period, but especially children who are coming from unstable homes. We were listening to a story just the other day about a young man who was afraid to go back to his foster home, and he acted out in school that required, this is a second grader, acted out in school that required 2 adults to help calm him down. Now, a zero tolerance approach is get him the heck out of here. We don't care about what's going on with him.
He hit somebody in the
hit
school.
somebody, he caused a commotion, just get him out of here. Now, this child could have been having all kinds of bad things happen to him in this foster home. There's a reason why this 7-year-old didn't want to go back. So now that we have talked to the local school district here, speaking of Dayton, they have implemented some restorative justice programs in the schools that had the highest need, which meant the schools that had the highest suspension rates last year. And so this young man was in one of those schools with a restorative justice program, and that's how they were able to get to the bottom of his behavior. There's this idea that schools don't even want to get to the bottom, especially with our youngest children. And that's why we advocate, and we continue to advocate, that we want a moratorium, period, on out-of-school suspensions for grades preschool through 3rd grade. It makes absolutely no sense to suspend these children, these babies literally, this young, and they have a 3rd grade reading guarantee that they have to pass before they can be promoted to 4th grade. That's ridiculous. So we will continue to advocate for that both locally and at the state level. But I just want to give the audience sort of a background of what zero tolerance is, and basically zero tolerance is they don't care about what's going on with the child. They just want the child out of there.
What's that thing? What has happened in many school districts as they cut money, because they have been cutting money for schools, is when you have you got a child that is disruptive, and you don't have a way of dealing with them within the school building, it becomes a way to deal with that child to get them out to school. It becomes an economic issue. In fact, when people say to me, and I always have someone who says it, well, how will we pay for it? I'm saying, you're proving my point. What you're saying is, we can't afford to educate these kids, we just need to put them out.
Right.
Okay? I don't have the answer for how we will pay for it, but I know how we pay for anything we want.
Right.
We start with the idea that we're going to get it.
They make the bombs.
And then we start dealing with what do we have to cut, what do we have to do. And if our biggest priority is to keep all kids in school and to educate them and to discipline them, and I do believe in discipline. You should ask my boys. But I think the discipline has to be appropriate, and all of the research, and it's frustrating to me that the teachers union isn't behind us on this, the local teachers union, because all of the research, psychologists, sociologists, everyone says that suspension is an inappropriate form of discipline for pre-K to 3rd grade.
What do you think is the reason for that they're not?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think especially dealing with the teachers union, I think that it's a multi-layered thing. I think that teachers are overwhelmed, right? There are high volumes of children in the classroom.
28, 29.
29, sometimes 30.
When they all need 20.
Right.
Okay, again, back to the economic issue. Okay, schools are underfunded, especially urban schools are underfunded. The teachers have higher stakes too, because, with this new law, with this 3rd grade reading guarantee, if a certain number of children are not passing this test, teachers are starting to get rid of it. So, teachers and the teachers union feel that, listen, this is an easy way to make their jobs a little easier. Let's just get rid of the disruptive children because nobody else in the room is learning and we can't teach. Okay. But at the same time, I'm a parent, and I don't think, I know for a fact that the answer is not to throw, because literally what they're saying is, and they're not saying it, but what they're saying is, we're gonna throw away these babies. We can't deal with them. Because we all know what's gonna happen.
They're the sacrifice.
They're the sacrifices. And we are here as an organization, as grandparents and parents saying, no. No, y'all getting ready to go back to the drawing board, and we're gonna figure this out, because we're not throwing away babies. We're not throwing away our children. They are the future, and if we get real about all the children are the future, we all need to collectively come up with a plan to deal with this. The answer is not to throw the child away. We're gonna start there, and that's my approach to it. And I'm upset because we have invited the local teachers union to come to us on multiple occasions. We have
Offered to go to them.
To do a presentation. We bent over backwards. They are not interested in talking to us. They are not interested in trying to mitigate this thing. And I think for me as a parent, that's very, very perplexing, and it's actually depressing, because what kind of teachers are really teaching my kids if they don't want to talk? This is ridiculous.
Let me ask, oh, go ahead,
But see, that's what I said previously about institutions. Our unions sold out a long time ago, as far as being there for the people. The teachers, see, they're pawns in the game as well, because the system does not even allow the teachers to do what they became teachers for.
Yeah.
So here they are, they caught between a rock and a hard place of providing for their families, and teaching the children, which they love to teach. That's why they got into it, but they're not being allowed to do that.
That's right. That's right. That's an accurate point.
So I mean, they're caught up in the same, the same tenacious equation
right,
that our children are. They're just being used, in that equation.
And I think,
I would like to know the teacher union's reason for not meeting. What do
They haven't provided one, and that's another thing we're upset, because they'll negotiate with the school district behind closed doors, but will not come, when we come to put things on record at the board meeting, on public record, they won't do the
they
same.
have not
done
made
the
a
same.
public record on their position. The best we can get from them is stuff that they
Statement on
post,
their website.
statement on their website,
Wow.
that our proposal to stop what we proposed was put a moratorium completely on preschool to third grade, and a moratorium in a year or two on disruptive behavior,
That's right.
and reduce racial disparity in 3 years.
We gave them 3 years to deal with.
So that was our
racial disparity. That was
proposal.
generous.
And on their website, their website said that would cause harm to teachers. And so-
Preschool to third grade.
And that's all. And we get trolls. I mean, we get trolls that come on the website. We get trolls that come to the meeting. We
Can you
sent.
explain what trolls are?
Okay, I'm sorry.
We know some of us, that's a new term that people use on Facebook. Okay, you know what a troll is.
A troll is a person who comes on your website or your conversation on Facebook who is there just to be disruptive and antagonistic and disagreeable. They're not really there to have a conversation, and they like to do. So that's a troll, and they like to do what we call flaming, which is to throw out some outrageous statement that get people riled up, and then you have to deal with that, stuff like that. And so when we was conducting our campaign, we had quite a few teacher trolls who would come on our website, and they would always give us, people would have, they were always wanting to give you an example of something they felt was horrible that required suspension. Okay? I had a first grader who sexually abused another first
Sexual
grader.
abuse in first grade.
Right.
That's exactly our response. Our response was, number one, that is not even possible. If they engaged in inappropriate
Sexual
contact, you got a first grader with a problem that came from somewhere, and you need to figure it out. And sending them home ain't necessarily. You know, we've got a student who threw a chair, and I like to tell, my son says he's 43 years old, so I never get tired of telling his stories. And I'm happy if he sees this on the internet, he's going to be mad when I'm telling him. My oldest son used to punch holes in the wall when he'd get mad. 6'6", 300 pounds, and
Football player.
And my attitude was, don't you ever even come my way with fists, because they were dead. And secondly, do whatever I told you to do, and thirdly, fix the wall. So that was pretty much it, okay? And he got over it and passed away, and he's a law professor now. So it didn't, it wasn't permanently harmful for me not to scream and rage at him and stuff like that. I know that there's some kids that really got problems that need to be dealt with.
Yes.
I mean, it would be
We're not
foolish
denying that.
to say that that's not true.
Right.
And maybe even a large portion in some schools. But at the end of the day, though, the school has to deal with the students they get, not the students they want.
Right.
You know, I might have wanted, when I was a public health nurse, and I was a public health nurse in Alaska, and I used to counsel young girls in, people wanted roses for their children, and I'm like, you ain't got a rose, you got a dandelion.
Yeah.
You can't treat it like a rose, because if you treat it like a rose, it's gonna die. You gotta treat it like a dandelion, and it will flourish, and then you will have a beautiful field of dandelion. And I think that's part of the problem we have with our schools. Schools want a certain kind of student, and they're still living in the hope and dream that they can get that kind of student, instead of saying, okay, this is the students we get, and we've got to redo our system to deal with the students we get, not the students we want.
Would you agree that the teachers who say, I didn't come to be a social worker, I didn't come to be a counselor, I'm a teacher, so I don't want to deal with these bad kids? Would you also agree that these teachers need some type of training? Because that's where my mind goes.
I think that if you really believe that and you're unwilling to do it, then you're not the teacher for this urban farm area. Because we need a teacher. I mean, I'm fine with you saying that's what you want, that's your mindset.
I've heard teachers say that.
And then
That's
the
why
school district should say you need to take a walk.
Yes.
Because we need teachers who are willing to encompass the whole road, because how can you help a student learn if in fact you aren't willing to be a social worker?
And what you were saying, meet them where they are.
Meet them where they are.
Because if that child shows up hungry, at that minute, he needs something to eat.
Or if they're tired.
Yes.
I once was somewhere where this guy actually brought a cot into his classroom, and when kids came to school tired, he just let them go back there and lay down and go to sleep. That was a better thing than constantly scolding at them for putting their head down, for not paying attention, for not being attentive. But no, I agree. I've heard teachers say that, and I think that that's part of the anger
From teachers.
Yeah, because they are underprepared.
That's what, you
The
asked
school,
that question, but
I don't think
ask
that
the same
the
one.
departments, the educational system, okay, I'm getting ready to out lawyers. Okay, being a law professor, the worst thing you can do is go to someone who just graduated from law school because they don't know nothing about being a lawyer, because law school don't train them for that. Okay, that the educational system doesn't train them to practice the minute they step out the door. Now, yeah, they get a license and they can take on clients, and if they're very intelligent and very good, they can do a good job. But the average law person who stepped out of the law school door doesn't have the skills stepping out the door to be a lawyer, and that's true for teachers, especially for urban areas. That whatever training they're having, it really doesn't train them to deal with the kind of teaching environments they're actually going into. So I think there is a frustration in that that means that the schools of education have to change. That they have to change their model, and it can't just be tack-ons. That's what now I'm seeing is happening is, oh, I heard at a meeting we were at, how all the schools are developing these little programs that are going to be urban fellowships for teachers who wants to teach in urban areas. Well, no, that's not how you do the training. You integrate it into your whole system from day one. And so everyone who ends up going through the training gets the training, and not just people who identify themselves as wanting to go into urban areas, you know. But schools of education aren't willing, at least the ones in this area, aren't willing to take that kind of approach yet.
Let me ask about, because you talked about this war on our children. And I mean, I think that it's obvious that there's a war on black children, and there is a war on poor children in general from these global elite, for the very reason that I stated earlier, is that they're no longer needed. And to educate all these young people to compete with their corporate, these mega corporations, they don't want that. So my question is, now with our community, we see a lot of apathy, and it seems like a lot of confusion and denial on the part of our people, particularly here in Dayton, because we're so holy rollers, where our heads are literally up in the sky. And we don't realize that there's a war that's being, there's a war on our children that is in truth just as devastating as the death of Trayvon Martin, as the death of Mr. John Crawford, because they are being killed on a mental level. Can you talk about some of the things that are coming up that they need to be a part of, and what you think may need to be done to get our people to wake up?
Well, I think that this is a great step. I think that the forums that we continue to have and us continue to develop information to get out there to the community, I think that, you know, to your point about the holy rollers, you're absolutely right. The church in our community has the ear of the people, okay? And so I think from that end, we have to have church leaders willing to step up and make social justice, racial justice a primary focus in their congregation.
Absolutely.
And so I think that that's where we have to start, particularly in Dayton, because that's just where the power is, and that's just where our people are in these specifically Christian religious institutions. Secondly, I think that Professor Randall and I are committed to continue to agitate the system, continue to agitate at the state level and at the local level to say all of us are not in the clouds, okay? All of us are not asleep, we're not zombies, and we are going to hold you accountable no matter how long it may take, or no matter how taxing it can be on both of us. Because I know for me, and I have said this to the superintendent, that I am committed not just for my son, but for all the little children who are just like him. I don't apologize being an advocate for black children, because the war is on our children. And I think that we have to expand this conversation when we talk about making our children able to compete in the world with everybody else. I think that we have to, again, look at curriculum. We have to look at what works for our children specifically. And I think so we need to start having those conversations as well. It's a multi-layered approach. I mean, it's really tough, you know, when you start to think about all the things that our communities face. Because another thing that Dayton has is a very, especially West, and a very poor community. People lack the necessary resources, housing, food. I mean, you know, just the things that we need to survive.
Right.
And so that can make it hard to be an advocate or an activist. You know,
It does make it hard.
Exactly. I mean, you're trying to figure out how you gonna pay your water bill, or how you gonna pay your dependent
You
bill.
can't be going to a meeting
You
down
can't
at
be going to a
the.
meeting about nothing. And so I think we need to keep that in mind.
It's not just the poor people. I know as a single, I raised my boys as a single mother, and I was blessed to be able to get a really decent education and to have decent jobs. But I also made choices. I made choices not to get involved. I wasn't this active when my kids was growing up. Not like you. I went to work and went home. You know, and I
That's
think
what most parents do.
and that's what, and it's a rational choice. It occurred to me, and I want to think more about this, but I'll lay it out here. I think we are a depressed community.
Yes.
Mentally depressed.
Yes.
Because I think the oppression has gotten to be too much. That the everyday oppression, I mean, think of the system we live in. We have everyday oppression, every day. Every day. You can't even watch a TV show. I mean, you think, okay, I won't read the newspaper, I won't watch the news. I'll just watch some simple TV show that is mindless.
You got a good point.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you,
You're gonna find it there too.
30 or 40 minutes into the show, they're gonna make some racial stereotype about black people that is gonna cause your blood pressure to go up.
So-called
That's the
comedy.
image.
I mean, you know, you can't go to the movies and enjoy it. You can't read books. I mean, you can't. You're a constant world, and then on top of that, you're always worried about how people are going to take you.
Yeah.
So I don't even think I'm calling them a racist.
Right.
And so you're constantly trying to articulate what's happening to you in a way that won't offend them.
Right.
You know, and so that's stress. You don't forget lack of money, lack of housing, lack of food, lack of resources, and you know, and then in a community, let's be real, Dayton is dying.
Right.
Yes.
We don't like to say that out loud. At least the what it was. Now there may be something that is born out of this, but it's going to be new, it's going to be different. It is not going to be anything like it was.
Yes.
But we keep trying to get that. We keep trying to find a way to bring Dayton back. No, let it die.
Right.
Issa, my son, who's an artist, said that we ought to have a funeral procession for Dayton so people can grieve and get over it.
Right.
And decide, okay, Dayton is never going to be what it was, and we grieved, we buried it, and now we can move on to something else.
Can I say something
Yeah.
about that depression? Because I agree. Because when you look at signs of depression, you see that people are very immobile. They really can't even get up and move. But I'll tell you, some of the problems that psychologists say that bring about depression is that people don't confront the issue. And they allow it to build and it becomes overwhelming. So when you look at the black community, this is the condition that we're in. And the very thing that you said is that we don't want people to label us as racist. Now, unfortunately, people know me and I'm probably already labeled because white people can be in the audience and it doesn't matter to me. The truth is the truth. And when you go ahead and confront the issue, you will find that that will take a lot of that depression off of you. Now, you're still depressed about the situation, but you're not so depressed that you are not going to get up and do something. And I think that in the black community here in Dayton, that there are a lot of cowards. There are a lot of cowards in this community who don't want. This is just me. I'm just a militant type of brother. But there are a lot of cowards in this community who want to hide behind Jesus. They want to hide behind a good paycheck.
Amen to that.
And they don't want to become active in saving their children.
Yeah, but I
can't give them this.
it's not a matter of
hide
giving it.
behind political people who they are connected to.
That's true too.
It's not a matter of giving an excuse, because, okay, so for me as a when I worked as a public health nurse, and I found someone in a depression, you can't get them out of a depression by telling them to move. They ain't gonna do it. They're depressed. What you have to do is just begin the movement itself, like you're doing.
Like we're doing.
And like all of you all are here doing. And so then gradually some people will begin to say, oh, well, maybe I'll just listen to this or whatever. But I think we have to give ourselves a break. I think that's the other problem we have, and that makes it hard. We want people to behave as if they're not oppressed.
Right.
But they are oppressed. And their behavior is appropriate. And I don't like it. You disagree with me?
No, I agree, but I think we have a hell of a high tolerance for oppression. I think that we have an extremely high tolerance, too tolerant, in my opinion. And maybe that's because I'm just different, because when I'm upset about something, I feel rage. I want to confront it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think in my opinion, I have to. And I'm just as I know, I was a single parent too when I was first going through the situation with my son. And that was a very dark time for me. I had to make some very tough choices. I had to choose. I was working full time. I was a full-time student in college at the time. And I had to make a choice to advocate for my son, or do I continue to put him in this situation where he's not wanted?
Right.
That was a very tough, because at that time I didn't even want to acknowledge that it was a race issue.
Right.
I was trying to find every other reason for it not to be a race issue. You know what I mean? And so I said, oh my goodness, I said, well, I have to pay my bills. I have to, continue to have money. So I had to drop out of college at the time, and that's how I evolved as an activist, because I spent a lot of time. This is time when I filed my own civil rights complaint with 2 different agencies. That takes research, that takes time. I had to go around and collect data. I had no training for that. And most parents don't have that time, or not, maybe the wherewithal, because I did it through research to find out about the Civil Rights Commission at the U.S. Department of Education. That's not widely known. Where is that posted? Right. It took me a while, to even know that was an available recourse for me. So I think there's a combination of things, not just that people are cowards, because I agree, we do have to give ourselves a break. I think there's a deliberate, with people withhold information from our community.
No, that's
and that is deliberate. And they keep us ignorant.
Let me segue into that real quick and say that is the reason why Knowledge for Life needs to be supported. We're a nonprofit 501c3, and that, one of the things in war is that those who have air superiority, meaning the media, and able to get their message and propagate their message over and over again, they're winning the war. And like you all are saying, this information needs to be disseminated, and this is one of the ways that we're helping to do that. So they can go once again to www.knowforlife.org. There's a big red donation button. Just press on that button and give whatever you can.
Because I don't like the war analogy. I agree with you. But we're not in a war. We're in a system of oppression. How do we bring down a system? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But we are in a system of oppression. And the school to prison pipeline, to bring it back to that, is fundamental to it. Because one of the profit centers billion-dollar profits in these prisons. And you gotta have prisoners.
Right.
And they build prisoners based on predicting who in the fourth grade. And so if you're suspending preschool, pre-K, preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, yeah, that child ain't reading in the fourth grade.
Right.
You know, if you got, and so if you have a large, and we're talking about hundreds of children in that age group being suspended. And even if it's just, the problem is that even one suspension for a child can throw them behind.
Right.
That they cannot catch up on. And so what you're then talking about is they can never make it up. And then they get to the third grade guarantee. They fail the third grade reading test and they're kept behind a year. What's predicted, then if they kept behind that year, then they kept behind other years, or they get passed through never learning to read, and they finally get to an age where they can quit, and they quit. They drop out, and then dropout is correlated. What they found in prisons is that dropout is correlated with being in prison. Suspensions is correlated with dropouts. So that's how we get the school to prison pipeline.
Can I?
But
She's got a question for Wallace.
A lot of people don't know that the prison system is on the stock market.
Yeah.
But are the schools? I mean, you had the
Private charter schools.
Private
Private charter schools can be on there, depending on who owns them. Now,
There's some large like corporations that own a number of them. I think Life Skills is one of them where they're like everywhere, and it's basically the owners in Texas a billionaire. There's one billionaire that owns all of them. Yeah.
So,
And you said we had a high tolerance, but does it seem as though we're being conditioned to have that high tolerance?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind.
Especially with the brothers that are getting shot. I mean, now it's every week somebody's getting shot. You don't see that.
And that's why I said high tolerance, because, and I know that we can't do an experiment like this because that's unethical. But I would really like to know if another group would. I hate to use it aloud, but I would be interested in the response from another group if their children were being murdered, like the way that our children are, and the type of response you would see from a community like that. I know white people would probably go completely crazy. This wouldn't happen until one of theirs, in my opinion, because we look at how we act as a country, how violent we are as a country. Oh, if somebody does something to us, oh, we go on to war.
Right.
But then we're not supposed to feel that way when you kill one of our kids.
Right.
You want to preach non-violence to us? To me, that's inconsistent.
and I think when we look down at Ferguson, with the execution of Mike Brown,
I'm proud of that community.
we see the proper response.
That's the proper response.
But what the system is trying to interject is this idea that voting is going to stop a bullet. Voting is good on a local level. I'll agree with that. But what the young people are doing to draw attention to this rate of murder of young black men by the police, the ones who have on the side of their car, protect and serve, they're not protecting us, and they're not serving us, because we've been shut down. And then you have these white ring radio, that's hard to say, the conservative radio talk shows with the Hannitys and the Rush Limbaughs, who are justifying this in the minds of white people. Not that we turn it off, but if we listen to them, we have to understand that they have millions of listeners. And so
they own almost 80 to 90% of the media.
Exactly.
And that's what is being perpetuated, and that's what people are hearing, and that's what they feed into and buy into. And even, like you said, you're proud of the people here in Ferguson. I'm disappointed in some of the so-called leadership in Dayton. It's one of the first things even our people would say. We want to approach this non-violently. We want to approach it this way. We don't want people to think that we're this and we're that, so we got to march in a certain way. And the fact of the matter is, they knew we were going to come like that. And so they just kind of did the weight game, no charges being filed, because they knew that we was going to have somebody there to tell us to, you gotta calm down. Don't let people show that you're ignorant. Don't feed into what they think you are. So
Do it the way the system
do
tells
the way
you
the
to do.
system wants you to do.
Even
Not
though you
by the
can't
marketing
understand.
scheme, you know.
Pipeline is training people to be responsive like that.
Exactly. Well, these kids are horrible. So not only are white people being trained to justify, I don't think we have to train them to justify the murder of blacks, but it's black people.
Yes.
You got black people who will say, well, as if, now even if Mike Brown did commit a crime, since when has an extrajudicial killing been legal in the United States for anybody? I mean, don't we have a so-called criminal justice system that you're supposed to go through?
But
It's okay to kill them like dogs in the street?
But the problem is the thing is that we have an oppressive system that has been going on for at least 20, 25 years. And I think to some extent the internet has made it more visible because we share stuff.
That's true.
But the killings and stuff has been going on. The school to prison pipeline has been going on. The segregation. I mean, the thing is that most Americans think that because there's no law that segregates, that we have no laws that enforce segregation. But that's not true. The reality is you can discriminate in this country based on race as long as you say you don't intend it.
Yeah.
That's the law. That is the law. Not that you can't discriminate based on race. You can't intentionally discriminate based on race. So you can discriminate for all kinds of reasons. Economic reasons, I feel bad in the morning reasons, and it can be based on race. And most people don't even realize that the law that put Japanese Americans in concentration camps, that's still good law. That law never got overturned. That the Supreme Court said back in 44, that it is legal to use race for national security reasons. Think about that.
Right.
That is good law today. So that means that all we have to have is somebody say, for national security reasons, I'm going to round up any particular group. You know, we live in a totally oppressive system of which, and this has always been the case, the brother that was here said it, blacks have always been at the bottom of it. But we haven't been the only ones. And the problem becomes is how you get this new prison to pipeline part of the system. I mean, when you have billions of dollars being made off of prisons and more prisons being built than schools and people closing schools, that's because they are expecting to put those people into prisons.
Right.
And they make money off of it. They make money not only through the profit, but it is slavery.
Yes, basically
They-
slavery.
It's not basic. It is slavery.
Right.
Yeah.
It is slavery. You put people in prison, you take away all their rights. For what reasons? The United States has more laws on the book. I tell these people, I say, if you think that you don't break the law, you just ain't have nobody try to find, because there's always something someone is doing. I can always find a law that you just broke. You just don't know you broke it. And most under our system, you don't have to know that you're breaking the law to be found guilty of breaking the law. And so I'm really worried about this prison industrial complex in which black and brown students are going to be the worst of it.
Right.
But we're educating urban students, we're educating kids to fit into that. There was somebody with a comment or question.
Let me get one in, and let me get this one in because you're on that topic, and then who wants to? Okay, and then we'll get the sister, and that is Wall Street. By law, they are those that are on Wall Street are by law must make a profit. So now you have the privatized prisons that are part of Wall Street. So by law, they have to make a profit, and that sets up that slavery system that we're talking about. But I also want to ask you, and on to that, is the question of this pipeline to poverty. Because one of the things that when I was doing some studying, it says that the education level is a future indicator of poverty.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
right.
not only are we going into prisons, which we at least get fed and have some place to lay our head, but we're looking at a situation now where they're not even educated to get a job. So what's going to happen? You know. To
Well,
those?
I think we really are. I mean, this is kind of I don't know what this can be a kind of a radical statement for some people, but I really do believe that we are in the process of turning this country into a third world country where most of the citizens will be undereducated, underemployed, and subject to corporate whims on when and how they work, and subject to poverty. I think it is a pipeline to poverty. You know, if you're undereducated, but the problem in this country is education alone doesn't keep you out of poverty.
I think we've got to talk about the economic system of capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, the right now, you know, what is it? It's some large, I don't want to say an actual number, but it's like 80% of Americans are close to poverty. If you're not close to poverty, it's only, and you live in paycheck to paycheck. But, so, you have, you know, you got corporations that don't hire full-time anymore. You have corporations that don't give any benefits anymore. You have corporations who, and it's all being subsidized by us.
Right.
By taxpayers. So, because, and so, yeah, and that's the kind of system that is being set up, and I don't know what to do about it, but I have to say that I don't know, I do think being in prison is worse than, you know, at least that, when you're in prison, not only do you have a restriction of your actual restriction of your mobility rights and what you can do, and you have the abuse of all the people that are involved in that system. You have your labor being used for next. I mean, one of the
23 cents a day.
23 cents a day, $1 a day, to do the work that they could be hiring people
That
out
they
here.
refuse to hire people for on the outside. Now, you get a job in prison.
Doing that work, you know.
Which sets up a system
Yeah.
because then we think for a lot of us that computers are doing jobs or robots are doing jobs or they're being sent overseas to
But
achieve
they're
labor.
prisoners.
But they're being they are right here in America, but they're behind bars.
That's behind bars. A lot of the call centers are being done by prisoners. People don't realize how much is being outsourced to prisoners. And so, if you never looked at a good movie, Slavery by Another Name, that talked about the system that was developed in the 1920s to
The chain gangs.
the chain gang and the use of prisons. We have slavery by another name now.
Slavery by Another Name. The author is Douglas Blackman. He's a former Wall Street Journal. I read the book too. The book is actually much better than the film. But PBS produced the film in 2012 and it came out during Black History Month. Excellent film, excellent book. The title again, Slavery by Another Name. The author is Douglas Blackman. And that's actually, Michelle, I actually found out the book by reading Michelle Alexander's book. She referenced him in her book.
And hers is.
Michelle Alexander is the new Jim Crow, mass incarceration in the age of color blindness.
Let me,
This is,
okay.
Okay, I read somewhere, maybe a couple of years ago that prisons were suing states because they weren't filling to capacity.
Wow.
Most of private prisons generally require states to guarantee a certain capacity. Most, usually around 80 to 90%. And so private prison corporations come in and say, we can come in here, we can save you a lot of money, we will do this cheaper, and you won't have to manage it, you won't have to do it, and we'll do it all. But to do that, now, you've got to guarantee 80 to 90% capacity. So now states have an incentive. And there's some really weird stuff going on with private prisons right now. For instance, first of all, they're getting into the whole immigration thing is something you're getting into. And this whole immigration debate, the hidden part of it is private prisons wanting to be able to house detainees while they, for whatever length of time, juvenile, they're doing juvenile, they're doing a lot of juvenile, and in fact some judge was convicted.
I was just about to bring that up. There's another documentary, if you want to look it up, called Kids for Cash. And that's about a Pennsylvania judge who was actually sentenced to 28 years for sentencing kids for stealing a candy bar, was giving them like 10 years. I mean, ridiculous stuff. This was in Pennsylvania. And so he was getting kickbacks from the private prisons, kickbacks, getting paid under the table to make sure that, again, the occupancy was there. So kids weren't doing anything egregious like going in and being a school shooter. They were just doing stuff that kids do to get in trouble, and it was really throwing the book at them. I mean, it was ridiculous. So Kids for Cash. So this is a system, you know, and I have to start talking about what I think we can do, because listening to all this can get depressing and make you want to just go home and get in the bed for a couple of days, because you're like, okay, what do we do? I think that there are some answers for what we can do. I'm a radical and I have my own ideas, but I know that's not getting ready to happen right now. So I think what we can do, you know, at first, is some of the things that we can do is not only, I think that having forums like this is extremely valuable, because we do need to know exactly what we're doing. We can't just assume that everybody in our community even knows that they're under oppression. Okay? So this is valuable. I know a lot of people want to say, well, what is the solution? Well, let's just jump right to the solution. No, we need to continue to have these conversations. We need to continue to bring this information forth in the communities, because again, remember, we're in an age where, you know, information is readily available, but we want to make sure we have correct information and we have the proper information so we can act on it. I'm not a huge fan of voting is the only way. I think that voting helps in local elections, but I think that people have to begin to organize in small circles locally in their communities. And what I mean by that is that we have to start re-educating ourselves. One of the teachers that I love to listen to and read about is an ancestor now, Dr. Amos Wilson. He wrote an anthology called Blueprint for Black Power. And let me tell you, I mean, it's a huge book. It's about 900 pages long. But if we want to know, and I'm concerned about black people, I'm concerned about everybody, but I'm concerned about black people. That's where my focus is. If we want to know how to organize, how to move forward, I think we need to look to history. I think there's a lot of different things that we can learn from history, first of all. And I also think that we can use that particular book as a tool. He talks about military science, political science, psychology. I was just talking to my significant other about how much psychology is an important to the black community, and how we skip over that when we start talking about solutions. Oh, we just need to collectively buy black. Let's buy black. Okay, well, we gotta deal with how we think about each other first. Okay, because we ain't rushing into black establishments to buy anything, because first of all, we got a higher tolerance for if it's a black-owned business, and it's psychological. It's been conditioned in us. You know what I mean? So I think, in my opinion, we should start there. Do I have all the particular answers? No, I think that's why we need to do it collectively. I'm not gonna figure it out by myself. You're not gonna figure it out. We need to come together collectively and do this thing. And so I think that it can start with study circles. We call them Sankofa circles sometimes. We come together, have small meetings with each other, and we talk about economics. We talk about how we're gonna organize. And I think the things that Professor Randall and I are doing, I'm a big proponent of the macro instead of the micro, because we can participate in what I call blaming the victim. Now, these kids acting bad is all the parents' fault.
Thank you.
Okay, whatever.
Now what?
The parents are victims too.
Right.
So let's move forward. Okay, we're gonna deal with the system. I like dealing with systems. That's also harder too sometimes. I mean, you can start working on dealing with systems sometimes, and you say, okay, this is impossible, I'm just gonna back up. I had those days where I just was like, okay, I can't do this. But I think that the more of us that can come together and start getting the right idea, we're not gonna always agree. We're not a monolithic group of people. I get that. I used to resent that, but now I get that. Okay? We can come together and still work towards the same end by us working in different pockets of different things. We don't all have to do the same thing. And so that's what I think about as far as solutions. You know what I mean? Coming together collectively. We can't continue to just sit and let things happen.
Right. And to that end, I think on the school to prison pipeline, there's some very specific things that need to happen. First of all, I think that people need to pay way closer attention to the school board.
Yes.
You know, they need to go. There's 2 meetings.
We're fortunate in, I think, Ohio, because we're local control. We're not controlled by the mayor here. In a lot of cities, it's the mayor. We elect a school board. We need to hold them accountable right here.
A school board is supposed to set policy. And, you know, the school board system in Dayton is set up, first of all, unless it's a meeting that they call confidential for personnel reason, every meeting they have is open to the public.
Everyone.
Every single one. And there are at least one that people need to start going to. And you can't talk at that. And that's the
Thursday evening.
Because that's where they set the agenda for the business meeting, and that's where they do all their talking among themselves about whatever's going to be on the agenda, and so
no community input.
With no community input. And then when they have the Tuesday meeting, which is the meeting where they vote, they don't talk. We've been going to those meetings, and you get to those meetings and they don't say much of nothing, and that's because they have done all their talking on Thursday.
The previous Thursday.
On the previous Thursday, and you need to know that. Secondly, we need some policy change. We need to get the Dayton Public School to say, whatever else is going on in the school district, whatever kind of problems you have, suspending pre-K to 3rd grade is unacceptable, period.
Period.
Just period.
Yes.
Figure it out. Pull the money from somewhere. Put together teams like New Jersey. New Jersey has forbidden the suspension of preschoolers, and they put together an intervention team. And when they have a preschooler that has a problem, they have an intervention team that comes together to kind of help try to fix that student and help the teachers and help the principals. They are in the process of deciding to make some major changes. What's that, December 3rd?
Oh, yes, I have flyers for that event. Thank you so much. That was a great segue. So, Dayton Public Schools are hosting 2 town halls. They just had one this past Thursday at Belmont High School that I attended. And the topic of the conversation is tough decisions. We need your help. The tough decisions is that there's too little money for their current operating budget, okay, starting with the 2015 school year. And the one that will be held on our side of town in West Dayton will be at the Dayton Boys Preparatory Academy, December 3rd at 6 p.m. I'll run out after this closes and get the flyers. December 3rd, okay, that is a Thursday, 6 p.m., Dayton Boys Preparatory Academy. You all may know it as the old Roosevelt Center. It's 1923 West 3rd Street. All right, we need everybody, let your networks know we need to be there and show up in force, because black children make up 66% of this school district, okay? And I'm not confident on this. I don't have the raw data to prove this, but I think that the vast majority of the resources are going to schools like Stivers, that's in East Dayton, that's the school that everybody loves. Okay, and some of the other smaller elementary schools in East Dayton, Cleveland Elementary School. Wow, and they admitted this at the meeting. There's 10 schools in the school district are the lowest performing. I just want everybody to guess where all 10 of those schools are. In West Dayton. And that is unacceptable.
And guess what they're proposing to do with underperforming schools? Close them. And so, are some of them. So part of the question becomes, at least from my point of view, is to say, we need schools serving our neighborhood proportionate to our representation.
Yes.
We need schools proportionate to our needs. And if our schools are underperforming, it's your job to turn them around, not close them.
That's right. So that's what we need people to show up at this meeting and force for. You know somebody that has a child in a Dayton public school, and somebody's got a grandchild in a Dayton public school. And even if you don't, they are babies anyway. All of them. We got to start thinking like that, family. We got to start thinking like this as a collective. That if a child in Dayton public schools or any of our children are failing in these schools, we need to step up for them, because some of them may not have parents who are able to do so. Yes. So we need people in this community who care and love them to step up and say so, to step up and advocate for them. Absolutely. And say, we don't want our schools closed. In fact, we make up 66% of the school district. We need proportionally, we need that type of money in our schools in West Dayton, because that's where most of our children are. They went back to neighborhood schools, I want to say about 10 years ago. And so the schools are very segregated, very segregated. And Stivers actually has a lot of kids that come from Oakwood to go there. I found out at the Belmont meeting that they hire adjuncts to teach at Stivers. That's the only school they hire adjuncts for? Oh, well, what about what's going on in the elementary schools and high schools in West Dayton? We got the 10 lowest performing schools out of the entire school district. That's unacceptable. And we need to show up and say that.
That's right.
Because I'm gonna tell you, the white parents showed up at Belmont, and they made it clear that they want Montessori to stay open. They made it very clear what they want. And I think as a community, we cannot afford to be apathetic about our children.
That's right.
I'm sorry, we have got to stop being, what he said, a coward. We got to wake up. And for parents who aren't able to be there, I think for us who are able, let's stand in the gap for those babies who don't have parents who are able to do it.
That's right.
That's so
how do we, because I love this, but the people in our community who can get the word out are not doing it. And I know y'all going to probably say more for this. The most effective messenger to deliver this message to our people is from the pulpit.
Oh, we said that earlier.
Right.
We complain
What do
about
we need to do to get them to deliver this right message?
I wish I knew, because we spent time
We try to
meeting
reach out to the
individually with pastors and churches, and the follow through was just poor.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, putting it kindly, you know, it's kind of like get them in the first meeting and it's all rah, 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 yeah. And then you try to get back to them, and when it's time to do something and you can't get a phone call return or email return.
They'll lose their 501c benefits. They have a fine line they have to follow.
No, we're not talking about endorsing.
We're not talking about endorsing a candidate. They can
They can get involved in
They-
issues.
because that's what has happened in the 60s. It was churches that stood
Oh yeah,
up.
one of the kids
Right.
was a pastor baby.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there,
That's
I
what's
think
correct.
there is. I don't think it's about losing 501c3. I think they can get involved in the issues and they can take positions on issues, and they have. I
They
don't
talk
know.
about voting.
Exactly.
And they talked about they rallied up when there was an attempt to pass an ordinance to make it illegal to discriminate against gay people. They rallied up against that.
Exactly.
You know,
Oh, they sure did.
so
I remember
it
that.
really isn't about the issue. It's about their willingness to put it involved. Now, part of the issue becomes, and this started with Bush #1, I think. There's a lot of money flowing from the federal government
To
to
churches.
churches.
Faith-based
FBI.
And I often wonder how much of that is kind of like they no longer want to make, they want,
That
they
was a
either
strategic
have
move
or
by
they
the
either
government.
getting money from the federal
They don't-
government and they don't want to upset.
The same thing.
And so basically what we have, if we're reading the Bible, since we're talking about the church, is there are characters in the Bible called hirelings. And these hirelings, they will run from the wolf as the good shepherd will stand there and defend the flock. And so we have a lot of hirelings up in this community, and I think that I'll take point for just any type of criticism. I just don't care anymore. I never really did though, tell the truth. So I think that programs like this that we need to just I say that we need to just put them out there on Front Street. That you are failing in your duty to Christ, not to us. You're failing your duty that you stood up there and you became a preacher on the word of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ got in trouble because he spoke truth to power. He was not necessarily political, but because what he was saying was against the establishment, that made him political. And that made him a threat to the corrupt current establishment that he was living in. And I think today, for these preachers to be so comfortable, as our community is seeing so much depression.
Many of the preachers don't even live in our communities.
Right.
That's another thing.
That's
A
unexcused.
lot of these black preachers don't even live in our communities.
Springboro and every
They
place
live
else.
in everywhere else, and so we didn't even get into that.
And
but
because this problem is not just a problem that is here, this is a problem that is, as we were saying, this is a national problem with a church on every corner. As Dr. Amos Wilson said, can you imagine that we congregate every Sunday in Mass? If the preacher would just say, support that black man, he's got a business. Or if the preacher would say that this is an issue that we have to address. Our children are being shot down in the street. When we had the John Crawford gathering at the Walmart, I'm looking at all these white people, and I thank white people for coming out, but this is a young black man shot down. And so, I think that's something that we have to definitely address. As we're beginning to wind this up, I definitely want to get my brother on camera and talk about a little bit about the coffee lounge that he's allowing us to hold these talks, these knowledge cycles at. And I definitely want to also, I know she doesn't expect it, but as I was saying, we have a youth program where we teach young people skills in video production so that they can begin to produce programs that will help give guidance to young people, because the older generation, aside from those who are here, they have absolutely failed to give any type of guidance to young people. I mean, the schools have a responsibility, but what responsibility is it for the elders in the community? That's a shame that we would have a situation where it's hard to find mentors. that we have a situation where the alumni of Central State and Wilberforce are allowing those schools to be closed. That doesn't make any sense at all.
How long have you been here and when do you open up?
Hey, can you come over here? Because we want to get you live. We want to get you live. You can sit right here.
All right. Well, my main thing is, my name is Darren, and this is the coffee house. But first, I want to say that the coffee is just what I'm luring you with. I want this to be a place where we can have these type of discussions and open forums and issues that concern our community. So we do plan on being open up on the 1st of December, and but we want this to be a place where people can come, Wi-Fi, read books, espressos, lattes, but not only that, where we can have these open forums where we can talk and discuss issues that concern our community. That's the most important thing. I want this to be known as a place of knowledge as well.
Thank
So,
you.
thank y'all for
Thanks for allowing us to
Oh,
be
yeah.
I know she didn't expect to be on the camera, but come on and sit in the hot seat. Sit on in the hot seat. As I was saying, that we have a youth component to Knowledge for Life called the Youth Expo Show. And we teach young people 13 through 18 skills in video production and light journalistic skills. And we want to teach them to be able to produce their own program that will address peer pressure, teen pregnancy, all these issues that will help give them guidance and inspiration. And so this is one of the young people, and she's so good with the camera. And then we have a lot of other young people, and most of them come from, not only are they black, okay, but they come from disadvantaged communities. And so a lot of times, young black youth who are from disadvantaged communities don't have that type of access, or don't even have the awareness to go into any other field besides what they see in their community, which is rap, football, or something like that. So we want to expose them to this excellent opportunity. We're working with the Greater Dayton, I think I'll be upset at me. The black journalists in this community are helping to train them. Dayton Access Television is helping to train them. So we're thankful to that.
Oh, really?
I started, it was like a crash course, recording the town hall meeting, and then every 6 months, with the workshop stuff.
What's your name again? Thank you so
Honesty.
much.
Thank you for
you
being
very
so
much.
honest. And
Thank you very
so
much.
we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Before we do, we definitely want you all to once again give out your contact information and what events are coming up.
Okay, so Professor Randall and I are the co-founders of Racial Justice Now. We're 2 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. Brother H.A. Jabbar is a part of our team.
Thank you.
So you can always, we actually have some pamphlets to give out about Racial Justice Now. I brought those in. You can also always go to our website, racialjusticenow.org, and look at our Ohio School Discipline Report Card. Again, that was just recently released in October of this year. We plan to do that yearly. It'll probably always come out after the academic report card, so that it allows us enough time to really crunch the data and data mine it and see how well or poor or better schools are doing from year to year. So we just started doing that this year as a recap. And if you have any questions for us, you can always email us at info@racialjusticenow.org. That will come to Professor Randall and me, and one of us will get back with you hopefully within 24 to 48 hours.
Our list of what we're doing is to work on trying to get the zero tolerance law overturned. So that's a statewide initiative. Work on trying to get a moratorium locally on in policy. I want to be clear. Dayton has adopted some practices, including saying no suspension for preschools who are non-violent. Okay, we can talk, But what we want is for the school board to adopt a policy that says no suspension for preschool to third grade, period. And so that's what we're going to be working on. And I haven't had a chance to share with Zakia, because of the work that we're doing in this education, I've been invited to represent us at Geneva in February before the Human Rights Committee.
No, that's wonderful.
Wow.
That is wonderful. And you know, we have two really one international figure, and then just a pure activist.
Yes.
A pure activist. And because when you know, when I say a pure activist, this is a person like myself who there's no training that comes with wanting to stand up for your people. You know, you can't really be taught that. You just have to have a passion for it, and you have to have a love for justice. That's all it is. And so with that, I want to say Knowledge for Life. Once again, we're a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. You can go to www.knowforlife.org or .info, and there you can sign up for our newsletter to get information on programs that we have coming out. I definitely want to thank Sister Lynn, who is here, who has really helped in behind the scenes. And with all of these things, there are a lot of people who do things behind the scenes that you never hear about. Sister Leah, who definitely has helped establish the nonprofit, getting our certification with the IRS, which they'll probably be wanting to take after this. No. And these are the struggles that I want to just say that, you know, for those who are hesitant or apathetic, who are complacent, who are scared, you know, if you just stand up, you will find that you thought you were afraid of don't have really any power at all. So in other words, the condition of our community, it just doesn't have to be this way. The only reason why it is this way is because people know. There's that saying that if everybody does a little, nobody has to do a lot. Mm-hmm. But if everybody did a little, then nobody would have to do a lot in this community. We wouldn't have to have our community looking in the condition that it's in. And so with this, we hope to have more programs, and we want to thank everybody who's here for coming out.
Thank you.
And participating. And with that, we'll go ahead and hopefully we got everything in, but you know how programs go when you turn the camera off.
You remember all kinds of stuff.
And you keep talking.
So with that, we want
we can still talk some more.
to thank everybody for watching in, and we continue to work with Mr. Boykin and having more programs like this.
Thank you.
So God bless.
Thank y'all for coming out.
You gotta have knowledge for life. 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 You gotta have knowledge